Economic Development Commission to order. And I take it we have no citizens to be heard.
No, Mr. President.
Consent agenda consists of approval of the minutes of the EDC regular meeting dated January 16th and approval of the EDC fiscal year ending 2019 revenue and expenditure balance sheet and encumbrance reports dated February 13th. Does anybody have any questions on either one of those two items?
Nope.
No, sir.
Could we have a motion to approve, please?
To approve?
Second.
Moved by Patrick, seconded by Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item 4 is discussion and action on the EDC FYE 2019 Strategic Work Plan. Could we have a motion to discuss, please?
Motion to discuss?
I'll second.
Moved by Patrick, seconded by Kathy. We went through this thing and made the changes basically that we had talked about at the last meeting. I don't know if anybody's had time to review it or not. If not, we'll let Glenn kind of go through this thing and show what changes we've made on it. If he can
No,
talk
just,
yet.
just pardon the cough. I think Pat got me sick last week, huh?
Oh, wait a minute, you can't blame this one on me this time.
So like President Wooten mentioned, we sat down and tried to go through our notes from the prior meeting to update the strategic plan, and obviously we can make more additions tonight and as we go along. And it's definitely a working document. Under Goal 1, which is on page 4, we struck through Priority 1 since that's been completed, and then we reorder them. And one of the other sections under the new Priority 2 projects, defining Class A office space has been complete. We struck that out. We struck out identify speculative office developers, and we put work with the property owners to promote development opportunities. We also added Priority 3, since Goal 1 is meant to be somewhat generic over develop industry targets. Well, office space is not the only target we focus on. So that's why we added in Priority 3, which was to encourage the development of mixed-use entertainment and hotel concepts. Right now, we've only listed one project, identify sites, and build consensus. So the biggest challenge right now that we face is property owners, whether it's a realistic valuation on their property or they're not wanting to relinquish control of the development of the property. So it doesn't have, the problem's not with the development community per se. There's interest in developing in Helotes, but it's trying to get that property owner to have buy-in to move forward with a project.
Do you have any questions on, more specific information on what we're looking at on these issues, or? No?
I do.
Okay.
In the past, I know boards have met in a workshop to go over these. And I don't feel we can just take this evening without any time for consideration.
That's what last meeting was a workshop on it.
Well, I don't think any of us were really aware that that's what it was.
I mean, there's no, as far as open meetings and everything, there's nothing different between a workshop and an EDC regular meeting. We discuss the same items, and we can go back and forth, make changes to the document.
Well, we tried to keep this generic to the point to define what we're going to work on. If we have a work session, we're not going to come up with any specific plans because we have no land at this time that's available that is acceptable to the developers for the type property we're looking at, because they refuse to unwilling to release the property and sell it to a developer, and they want to retain control of it, so there's really nothing we can do till we get their buy-in.
Well, and I understand that. It's just, I would like to have more time, maybe until the next meeting, to go over this.
Does it have to go to city council?
Once this board approves it, yes.
Oh, okay, but there's no time, I mean, we can have a little time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's designed to be
It's a living document,
it is, absolutely.
so
We
it
can
can
make
be
changes to
amended
it
at
as we
any.
go along.
Yeah.
Right.
So we've tried to modify it based on last meeting's discussions, and hopefully we'll have more discussion tonight.
Did most of the changes come from problems that arise from last year's copy of this? In other words, did these changes come about from somebody complaining, or it didn't fit right, or?
No, we just updated what was in last
I was
year's
wondering why we
basis.
were updating if somebody didn't say something about,
No.
this needs to be updated or something.
No,
We're required to update it once a year is why we're doing it.
yeah, there was nothing.
Pat, pardon me, I have a question or concern. Where in this document do we encourage outside developers such as a major commercial development like CBRE or Jones Lang LaSalle or Cushman Wakefield, one of the bigger ones, to come in and build office warehouse flex space type buildings? And I have a reason for asking the question. Is that addressed in this document?
I mean, to me, that would fall under goal one.
Oh, that's what I thought. And the reason I asked the question, I'm having some work done at my house, an electrical contractor, and he mentioned to me that he's getting to the size of company that he needs some office warehouse space. And he told me that he had found a location somewhere around the 1604 I-10 area.
Correct.
And I asked him, I said, well, he lives in Sonoma. And I asked him, did you look in Helotes? And his answer was, yeah, I looked in Helotes. That's where I want to be. But there's really no office warehouse, flex space type buildings there. And obviously, if it's one of any size, it's going to have to be a major commercial developer to do that. Do we have a process or to ask or encourage a developer to come into Helotes and look at that?
We do, and that's been a known area of underservice here in Helotes, because honestly, the only one we have is right here in front of City Hall.
That's correct.
That falls under that
And he
kind
said-
of classification, and it's very small, very dated. We've sat down with a number of developers here in San Antonio, local developers, one of them who even owns a piece of property here in Helotes, to try to formulate building a new professional business park. We've lost, I would say, easily 10, 15 businesses in the last several years, moving outside of Helotes because we don't have a large enough space. They use what's here as an incubator and then move into San Antonio.
And that's a problem, obviously. We'd
So
like for them to
the
stay.
challenge tends to fall more on overall cost. So the property values here in Helotes they cannot make the numbers work with the rents that they would need to charge for a business park, or should charge for a business park. Obviously, that's something that the EDC can address in incentives, but usually business park's not gonna generate sales tax. And that's the EDC's biggest fund, is sales tax.
Well, they wouldn't, but the lessees would generate sales tax, I would assume, from the sale of their products.
Well, the biggest problem we've had with it to date, Alan, was we didn't have any commercial property that had sewer and water available.
I got it.
And you're not gonna get that type of development unless you have the infrastructure.
Absolutely.
We now have it, but
We do.
we've got sewer and water all the way on the north side of 16, which is where most of the potential commercial property is.
Right.
But it just runs down basically and stubs out at Scenic Loop. Anything past that's in the ETJ, and that piece of property at Scenic Loop has about 3/4 of it under environmental quarantine, so to speak, because of endangered invertebrates.
birds.
And with the amount of frontage it has, the SAW's impact fee is gonna be like $1.5 million before you ever start to break ground on anything. You take that and combine it with the property values that people here are asking. Most of them are at, some of them above what they're asking inside 1604 that has a lot more traffic count and will draw more people.
Got it.
And that's what we're facing, trying to do. We have talked to a number of people about doing it, and we're not getting any interest. Well, we've got some interest on some things now that are under agreement that we can't discuss it, and they're about to fall through because they can't get the participation from the landowner. We're doing about everything we can on that, and have been for several years.
Are you allergic to me?
I don't know. Allergic to the environment.
Okay. I'm like, allergic,
But yeah, I mean, really to address your question, it's something that we actively pursue.
Understood. Just without much success.
And
At
they've
this
had
point.
success to date, yeah. Well, we just now, within the last year, have got the sewer and water project
yeah.
completed.
Yeah.
So now we're at the point that there is some more potential for doing that, since they have the infrastructure to work with now. Prior to that, they couldn't even get, they're not gonna put anything if they can't get fire protection. What water lines we did have were on one side and not the other of 16, and the price to bore under 16 is probably gonna be $500,000 to run the line, and then whatever SAWS requires you to put in would be another $500,000 or more, just to get the water to the property. So we've got a better situation now, and that's something we'll discuss a little later when we discuss defining cities' long-term growth goals. We can only do a limited amount of incentive as EDC. If we get a major developer, the incentive's gonna have to come from the city in the form of sales tax rebates or property tax
Reductions.
rebates or impact fee rebates to the individuals to build it. And we actually don't have much any control over it.
Got it.
Very true.
Well, how do you get control of it?
We don't, the city has control over it.
But, okay, so to get businesses on the other side of 16 that does not have,
Well, it does have sewer and water now. We just finished that project.
okay.
We don't have any sewer and water down 1560 that we can hook on to. That doesn't have a lot of potential commercial property on it, but there's property that's now maybe classified as residential. It could be reclassified as commercial, but the traffic flow as such is not very attractive right now. I think the state within the next 2 or 3 years is gonna let a project to rebuild 1560 all the way down to Calabria. When they do that, you've already got a couple of schools over there and development at Shanefield, and it's working more south than it is north right now. That'll have some more potential as we get some more infrastructure put in. We're lacking road infrastructure over there. And we've got the project going on Hausman on this end that is supposed to be a 2.5-year project, but I think the way they're going on the project, I think they'll get it completed quite a bit sooner. They're working really fast. I think they gave them some good incentives to finish it early. That will help. There's some potential commercial property over there, but not much of that's actually in the city limits either. We're getting where we need to be. We're just not there yet with the infrastructure and the hardware we need on the ground to make it work. And we do, like Glenn said, we do talk to developers all the time. They come to us, or we've solicited some to look at it, and they keep running into stumbling blocks. We didn't have the infrastructure and with landowners on being able to get it done. And if they can't come to an agreement with the landowner, there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah.
Let's go on through this thing, and then we'll come to a consensus on
Okay.
what we need to do. If we need to have another work session to do on this, you're gonna delay it a couple more months, and we're already about 4 or 5 months before, we're behind where we should be to do this. We normally should do it at the first of the budget year, which is October 1st,
We
or
have to-
September, October.
Yeah, it's okay.
Glenn, it would have been very helpful had this been in our packet, along with the agenda.
Yeah, we just actually finished it up yesterday.
But we would have then known what was expected of us tonight. that
Well,
it was a work
everything in
plan.
here is what was discussed at the
We
last
discussed
meeting.
last week,
No,
or last
this
month.
is, the agenda says that we're going to act on, we're going to discuss and act on the strategic work plan, but there was nothing. It was the
We went through the whole
2018.
work plan last month.
Oh, I know,
She wasn't here.
but we did,
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and go through where we are, and we can make some notes on it, Steve.
sure, of
And
course.
we'll come back and discuss it. And we can make changes on it tonight if we want to.
Okay,
The,
Or next week or next month, because it's a living document.
yeah,
absolutely.
goal two, I'll cover that one if you don't mind. It covers the Gateway signage project. We modified that. We've had some initial meetings with the stakeholders in it. Project is to locate, design, coordinate installation of gateway signage along Highway 16. And it's come up since we said Highway 16 that we've also got Hausman and 1560 that we could put gateway signage on it, the city limits on those too. We've got two thoroughfares that go through the city is it. First project's to locate and secure public or private property for signage locations. We are to date still waiting on TxDOT to get an answer out of them if they will allow us to put anything in the right-of-way, and Glenn's come up with a couple of other potential locations on private property that we can talk to, but we're trying to get word out of the state before we do it. If located on, well, we got to coordinate and get their approval. Then the next step would be to develop a project cost estimate and coordinate with the city on funding options. That, once we see what it's gonna cost, we'll know if, I don't think we'd have to buy the land. We could probably make a lease with the property owners to put a signage on there, or maybe get the access to it donated by the property owners. There may not be any expense with that. But then you've gotta develop an estimate, decide what kind of signs you want, and get a cost estimate on it. And then we engage a sign contractor at that point. But once we get to that, we've got to discuss with the city who's actually going to fund this. Because to me, funding gateway signs has little to nothing to do with economic development. I think it's a project the city should fund, and I don't mind maybe doing some joint funding on it, but I'm not in favor of the Economic Development Commission paying for the whole thing. Have comments on that one?
What size property do we anticipate that it would take to put up a sign? I suppose it depends on whether it's a monument size sign or a
It'd probably be something somewhat along the lines of what we've got on Old Town. Might be a rock structure with a City of Helotes sign. The sign would be larger than what we've got on Old Town, but something.
Yeah, that's
that-
what I envisioned that we would be doing.
Like, welcome to Yellowstone.
As far as sign construction, we're not talking a lot of money.
Well, it depends on what you build. If you build a big rock structure and put a sign on it and do 2 or 4 of them.
Depends on what you call as a lot of money. Those signs in Old Town were $24,000 a piece.
Wow.
Yeah. When you start doing that kind of thing, it's not cheap, and you're not talking about a lot of land, and we may be able to work it where we don't even have to purchase the land. But it's still gonna be a fair amount of money, especially if we go ahead and decide we wanna do all 4 roads, or the city decides they wanna do all 4 roads. I'm gonna go through
That'll
3,
take
Glenn.
years, so don't worry about it. I'll like to see that again next year. Yeah.
Glenn on 3.
Yeah, so that's for me? You're throwing me
That's
out
for
there
you.
for 3? Yeah. So really, under priority 1, we just took out the geo-tracking data in intelligible formats like Microsoft Excel. I personally don't feel Microsoft Excel is an adequate format to be displaying data. We need to be using infographics and other easily digestible content. People don't go through sheets and sheets of data. They're not going to spend the time. The geo-tracking, the only reason I struck that is we got rid of the contract with Retail Strategies, and that's how we were able to obtain that information. So we no longer have a source for the geo-tracking. We did strike out priority 2. Again, that was the retail consultant aspect, which we'll have an update on that a little bit later. And so then priority 3 became the new priority 2. So not a whole lot of changes in that section.
Well, and kind of that one too, we need probably, we need some input from the city on that. It says better communicate the city's commercial growth strategy. That's more of a decision that the city council would make rather than the EDC, and we will support and promote that. I would think we'd want to get some more input from the city on that.
Very true.
What do you think, Rick?
Yeah, I mean, I think that really was predicated on the city and working with the EDC to encourage annexation in the ETJ.
Yeah,
And so I think it's both the city and the EDC because it behooves both of us to have people annex so that both
Yeah.
entities can receive more money, either property tax or sales tax. So
right.
that was the gist behind that
That's the
priority.
primary goal.
Yeah,
I don't know
so,
if they
and the way
want
we
the city-
typically would do that would be during pre-development meetings when a developer comes in that's in our ETJ, and the reason that they would come in is because they still have to plat in the city of Helotes, even though they're in the ETJ. We would talk to them about annexation at that time.
We have some more about that in here too, as we go along, but you're right, the only potential we really have at this point to get somebody to come into the city would be the fire and police protection, better fire and police protection that they would get by not being in the ETJ.
Or an incentive, because the EDC and
Well,
city,
right, and-
neither one would incentivize a non.
Yeah, we'd have to, we've got a thing or two we're looking at, there might be something we could incentivize on it. We can incentivize, and the city can also, city has a lot more power to incentivize than we do. Just because of the structure of the political, the governmental requirements on the board and the funds that we have access to.
Goal 4 we had was, and that's on page 7, the visitor center. We added, under projects, complete a cost-benefit analysis of leasing versus ownership. That way, we can make a much better educated decision. And then on obtain approval from stakeholders and city council on most viable option. So that was the last one. On this one, I know the Historical Society has already approved it was a resolution. They approved a resolution supporting the creation of a visitor center and the cooperation between the Helotes Chamber and the Helotes EDC. I know there's just a lot of moving parts to move forward with the visitor center. If it's something we were looking at leasing a structure, one has to become available. In an old town that doesn't happen all the time, it does, and they tend to get snatched up pretty quick.
At least before they ever go on the market.
We actually just learned of one that may be coming available in the coming months. But there's already a lease on it, a letter of interest at least. So and then you come down to construction. I do have an architect and an engineer, I think, that can at least do some preliminary assessments on the development cost and do some sketches for free, pro bono. Kind of give us some idea of what we're looking at.
One of the other things that I'm also doing, and it's the next goal that's going to come up, but part of my research is also looking at those same cities that are comparable to us outside of larger cities, is to see if they have a visitor center. That's one of the other things I'm also looking at.
Very cool.
So I'll give you any feedback as I come across.
Okay. Definitely appreciate it.
That's a midterm goal in 2019 and 20. It's going to take a fair amount of time to locate the property and then find out if any is even available and determine cost. And like Glenn said, we can get some preliminary estimates on cost of the building if we're going to build a building.
So goal 5, we changed it up under priority 1 projects to read, because honestly, myself and Pat both, the new resident packet just, not necessarily it's confusing, but paper's not, we agree, we took notes from our last meeting. I mean, and we definitely agree, paper's not the way to go, some type of digital format. So we put in here, assist the city in developing digital content for the city and EDC website. And then it goes on describing desirable industry, business types, and incentives used within the community to promote economic development. We felt that better highlighted what needs to be done.
And as we develop that, we'll be developing it in conjunction with the city, and whatever we put in there will be on the city web, all linked on the city website at several different places where people can find it easier and get to it without having to drill down through 2 or 3 different formats to get to it.
And then under priority 2, we previously did not have any projects. So highlight the benefits of being located within the corporate city limits, and that goes back to trying to encourage, ETJ properties to be annexed, and then encourage annexation. The biggest carrot for annexation, if they don't care about police and fire, because, they're serviced by Bear County Sheriff or one of the ESD districts, is gonna be an incentive. We've got one manufacturer that's looking at building a 25,000 square foot manufacturing facility with 50 employees in the ETJ. There's no reason for him to become part of the city and be taxed at a higher rate unless we give something up. So I'm going to bring him to the table, have a pre-development meeting, and just see where it goes. But, that'd be a great project for the city. 50 employees in manufacturing. And it's LED panel, so it's not any type of dirty industry. Definitely clean. Under priority 3, we added a couple of projects, create a campaign that promotes what to see, do, and eat in Helotes, and then develop videos that highlight activities in Helotes.
Do we want to discuss with the board with regard to what we were discussing as far as our notes go with the research from the last meeting? So I took the task of, and I began the research with regard to looking at comparable cities such as San Antonio and then cities outside of those major cities. And some of those that I identified in the top 10 in the U.S. were Phoenix, Tampa, Philly, and of course San Antonio. Looking at other cities that are comparable outside of those cities that I just mentioned, looking at what their websites are, what are they doing as far as attracting not only just tourists, but also business, and how do they construct their websites, and what can we do with the city of Helotes and the website. And the way that we've approached is we have 4 websites right now, and we're looking at it from an inward-outward perspective, where for the outside person, it's really, the experience should be outward-inward. In other words, they want to come to one site, not 4 different sites and get bounced around from one link to another. Looking at the other websites from those comparable incorporated cities, they pretty much have aggregated all of that information into one website. So you can find everything that you need to find, whether it's events, anything that is business related, anything that is real estate related, and so forth on those sites. And I'm building up all this research, and I'll share it with the rest of the board as I build it along. But to give you a high-level overview as far as the timeline goes, what we discussed was me putting together the research and then putting a presentation together by June, the end of Q2, so that we can then go ahead and do an RFP. I believe it was July, August, put an RFP out there for companies that would be interested in responding to it, and then do the interviews in August, and then hopefully present that to the council so that we can go ahead and move forward with that for the October budget. And then move forward with any changes that we want to make to the websites, and obviously there'll be some.
I know one thing that I thought was interesting, looking at a lot of those comparable suburban cities, is every one of those sites was almost laid out identical.
And they almost have to be, right? Because they're in the same business as we are. We're a city, what more can you really offer except for maybe 5 very high-level areas of interest? And then it breaks down further into those different areas. The one other thing that we were discussing is a mobile app capability where now we are pushing notifications to not only residents of Helotes, because right now everything is paper intensive, and we rely on the residents to go to the website. By creating a mobile version of it, what we could do is push notifications to devices for any events that are being updated by the businesses that are pushing it into the website. In real time, we can go ahead and push those notifications to their devices, and now they're aware of what's going on in real time. So that, I think, would attract more businesses to the site, to City of Helotes, because now we have that technical infrastructure in place to draw the residents of Helotes to whatever businesses are here in Helotes.
Oh, that,
And at the same time, they can also advertise on the website, so that's generating revenue for the city to support that infrastructure.
that's great. That'd be wonderful.
Patrick came up with these ideas. We met with him like week before last, I guess.
Week and a half, 2 weeks ago.
And just discussed the concept. It's going to be an ongoing process. It's going to take, Patrick's doing most of this stuff himself in his spare time, which he doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of.
Not right now, no.
So it's going to take a little time to start putting it together, and we need to, as we get closer to doing something, have some input or maybe a presentation or a work session with the city council on it to go over what we're talking about to get, we'd be basically revising the whole website setup and making it more user-friendly. And unfortunately, I don't see it, and Rick and Glenn and Susan are probably the only people in the room young enough, other than Patrick, because he works with computers, to realize how much is going, how much now the younger generation does everything off the computer. They don't even look at paper. You mail them something, and they're gonna look at it and say it's from the city of Helotes and throw it away.
Yeah, we need to put a value add in front of the businesses and tell them why this is a good place to go ahead and move their business to, or conduct business in Helotes.
But then we get back to the availability of property.
Well, that's a fact of life right now, and that will change as time goes on, as property owners change and different generations change. It may take a while, and some of it may be fairly quickly.
If you build the infrastructure, the city would become more attractive to those businesses, hence maybe the offers are better, and
Yeah.
if the offers for the property are better,
Yep.
sometimes it's hard to say no then.
Right.
I got a simple question, it might be dumb, but I wanted to come into Lotus or north side of San Antonio, and I want to see where the available property is. Is there any kind of a map, or where do I go to see if a certain lot's available, or there's a lot behind these 2 buildings that you never see, but it's available? How do you know how much property we have out here, business-wise, that's available? Do I have to see you directly, or what?
Sometimes. Usually, if it's someone in the commercial industry, they're gonna have a broker that has licenses. Either the brokerage firm, like CBRE maintains their own database, they work through other brokerage firms too, or they have licenses with CoStar or other property listing agencies.
And that's actually one of the things that the website would do, is it would allow those brokers and agencies to go ahead and post those available properties on the website. So businesses as well as residents can now look
You know, some
actively
kind of
on the site.
General map, it'd
There
be
is a
changing
general.
all the time, but, you know,
There is
I've
one.
been out looking for places, you know, I set up a business in Corpus about 25 years ago, and I spent a week down there myself just driving around and looking at traffic and flow
And that's honestly what a lot of them tend to do.
but here again, is there any place, if I wanted to go to Lotus, is there any place that has 4 X's on the map that says those 4 places are vacant? You don't know whether they're vacant vacant or for sale, or
Not,
what's the status of it?
not a complete database, but that's something else that we'll be addressing. So we found a company we think can accommodate that for us.
Are you talking about like a Zillow for commercial space?
Yeah.
There you
Right.
go.
Right.
Okay.
I like Zillow.
And then, goal 6, the create a municipal development district, I believe. Do we want to do that now as part of the goal, or? We made a few modifications on there. Instead of evaluate the feasibility, more proceed with creating a municipal development district once the city has acquired the release of the San Antonio Metro Transit Authority's sales and use tax. And then we did strike out, obviously, determine the feasibility of releasing, and added coordinate with city staff to acquire the release via sales and use tax. We also slightly modified the last project, proceed with steps to hold an election to adopt an MDD.
Basically, all that means is we would be offering any assistance we could to the city in that process. That's gonna have to be done by the city. There's a number of steps you have to go through to get to the point of having an election. We could probably be helpful with that,
And this was done before we received this letter.
yeah.
Living document.
This is correct. We're good.
Okay, so now we have kind of gone through this. Stevie wants to have another work session on it. I don't really know what we're gonna accomplish by doing it, Stevie. If we try, we're not gonna go into a bunch of specific goals and put them in there, because we don't have anything really too specific we can do with what we're dealing with the landowners. It's an ongoing process, and we don't have 5 people lined up or 5 people we can go talk to try to get to do this.
Well, and actually, after going through the preliminary, and again, I wish we would have known before coming to the meeting that we were going to have the work plan. But
Well, again, we had to, actually should have gotten some data to you. That's what we did at the last meeting, was work through that.
all right, I've got to bring this up. Our agendas have very, very little support information. For instance, had we seen that this was a work plan, we would have known how we were going to act this evening. On item 6, we don't know how much the lunches cost. We don't know how many they are. We don't know how many we'd be asked to sponsor. We don't know basically anything of the information that we need to have in order to make an intelligent decision before we come to the meeting, or have questions before we come to the meeting. We also have, again on 6, we've got the service and office use agreement between EDC and the chamber. Well, it expired, where was it in here? It expired September 30th, 2018. And we don't know if it's been renewed. We don't know basically anything. There's no support information in our packets to help us intelligently study a matter. And I really would appreciate if that was addressed.
Well, the packet was delivered by email to you last week.
And all it had was
I
the
know, but if you have
2018.
questions, you can direct them to Glenn.
Well,
to-
just, no, Pat, that's not it. Really,
The
we
work,
didn't-
the work plan I was out of town last week. The work plan was not completed. Monday was a holiday, was not completed until yesterday is why you didn't have it sooner.
Well,
And we said at the last meeting that we would have the work plan for review and approval at this meeting.
I certainly don't remember that. But that's beside the point. I mean, we are not given enough, the agendas go out, the packets go out ahead of time so that we have the opportunity to do our own research, to ask questions, to come prepared to the meeting. Our packets are very incomplete, unlike those of council. Council has great support information in theirs.
And item 6 is a very simple, mundane item. We'll be told what the cost is tonight at the meeting.
We should have known ahead of time.
What
We should have
difference
known
would it
that okay, have we sponsored the luncheons before, and what benefit was it to EDC?
We'll discuss that on the item. We would not have that in the backup anyway. We could say we have done it in the past, but that's why we have the meetings to discuss the specifics on the items.
Pat, we don't come prepared. A lot of times, we don't even know, like, we didn't know that this was going to be another workshop.
Well, it wasn't, it was designed for the final review after we went over it at the last meeting, Stevie. We went through this at the last meeting.
I don't think were you here last week?
Yes.
Okay.
And we
Okay.
made the changes basically and reworded what was in there from what we discussed last week and brought it back for final discussion and approval. What else would we do?
I don't think so.
I didn't think she was there. That's all.
Had we known, okay, I'll concede that I must have misunderstood. But we really need more information ahead of time to make decisions.
Well, if we
I
had that
feel strongly.
information, for example, for number 6, the luncheon meeting, if they were able to provide all that information, then we could have just emailed back our answers. I think that's
Well-
why we're here to converse about item 6, as opposed to getting all of that information to support it.
And when we get there,
Well,
I made an oversight in the background documents. I notice now there's 2 pages missing. But we can go over that if we open that item up for discussion. So it's part of the original packet, but it didn't get transferred over. It jumps from page
We
3 to
will look
5.
at future agendas and put more information in.
Good,
We can do that, that's not a
good.
problem. But it's not gonna be all the detail, and some items, like item 6, may not have much anything in it if it's a mundane item. And the renegotiation of the chamber thing is something that we've just continued on with at the same arrangement we had, which is we're getting sponsorships to Chamber of Commerce events in lieu of rent for money that we would be paying to the Chamber of Commerce for their different fundraisers, having tables and that sort of thing. Didn't get brought up sooner. I don't know exactly why, but we just,
That's not part of that item for discussion. It was put in as background information to show what the EDC already receives from the chamber on sponsorships as part of the agreement. That agreement was actually extended last October, I believe, either September or October. It came before the board at the time. But you may not have been on the board when that item was
before
approved.
you were on it. Now, could we have a motion to discuss item 6? EDC sponsorship of Helotes Area Chamber Power Lunches.
I motion it.
Second,
Move and second, Patrick and Stevie.
Question?
Well, Glenn, give us a,
Correct.
little background on it and what the,
What is it?
What, okay. So, okay. The first document that was included under item 6 is the service agreement between the Helotes EDC and the Helotes Area Chamber, which the EDC is providing the chamber an office space for their admin assistant and membership director. In exchange, the EDC receives sponsorship of a couple of events. And what they receive is the Top Golf Tournament and the gala, which the gala was on February 2nd. And the EDC had a table at that event. It's also the business award ceremony for the Helotes Chamber.
But we paid for our table.
It is part of the agreement. We didn't pay any extra. We received the table for, in a sense, for free. Barter system.
Okay.
I had sent something to Rick last week asking if the EDC, if we could place on the agenda an item for the EDC to sponsor the power lunches. And
All of
that's-
them, or?
You can either do individual events or all of them. There's two options. So to be an annual sponsor and to have EDC's logo on not only the flyer, but the Facebook post, all that kind of stuff, is $1,000 a year, and per event, it's $250.
How many events do they have?
So there's at least 6 power lunches a year. There could be, and I say at least, because sometimes we'll get a special request from CPS Energy or another entity that would like us to host an additional event that's not on the schedule.
So the $1,000 per year would probably be more beneficial.
It's definitely a lot.
explain, I don't know if everybody here is familiar with exactly what the power
I'm not,
lunches
I'm
are.
not.
So I can go
I know
down.
nothing about them. I'd like to hear a little bit about what it is.
The power lunch,
Who comes?
so the power lunches are geared as an education, 90% of them, as an educational avenue for the business owners. Obviously, all the members of the chamber, plus everyone on the contact list that we've built up over the years, gets sent the information. The next power lunch is actually the State of the City address with Mayor Schoolcraft. They do topics, they survey the business owners in the area to find out what their needs are, what their interests are, what they want to learn more about. Typically, marketing is up at the top, so every year they do some type of digital marketing or generational marketing type topic. We've done cybersecurity.
North Chamber?
Say that again?
Cybersecurity with the North Chamber?
Not with the North Chamber. We find various speakers. They've done them on leadership, they've done HR. I mean, just anything out there of interest to business owners. It's something that the EDC actually started before the chamber was around. We would hold meetings here in the council chambers, and EDC would pay to bring in the speaker, the food, we'd do had to set up all the tables and chairs before and after, fun. But when we did it, it depended on the topic. We could get anywhere from 8 people to 25, 30 people. That would have probably the largest event we had. And I think we brought in kind of a heavy hitter in the digital realm. It was Brad Parscale with Parscale Media before he kind of blew up his company. Anyway, so when the chamber came on board, they kind of started taking the lead on doing those type of business educational workshops.
This membership, future members, is that the members of the Chamber of Commerce?
Yes, sir. So any member of the chamber gets a discount. And then full lunch is provided.
And where are they held?
It's gonna be a
Now.
country store.
They move, they rotate. So the next one, is Floors Country Store. They usually give us this facility for free. So it makes it a very attractive venue. Sometimes
They have 100 people at it.
Pedrati's Ranch does the same thing. They'll give us the venue for free.
This, the tickets, or these are for the members, at $25 a person per members?
Yes, sir.
And what is $1,000?
So 1,000 is a sponsorship. So for the,
Advertising, we got some
It's marketing
displays.
awareness.
correct, showing that we support the business community, and
Gotcha.
we actually have a line item in the budget for workshops.
Sometimes, like, the one, this next one, the $25 and $35 fee may well pay for the whole thing, depending on the number of attendees you have. But some of the others, you may have 10 or 15 people there, and you've got quite a bit more expense with the catering and everything else that goes on than the $25 fees or whatever. You only got 10 attendees, so
They use prior history of attendance, and then, of course, how many tickets have they sold by X date, so that they can go ahead and figure out what they need to cater.
yeah.
Absolutely.
You need a motion to approve $1,000 for this, is that what you need?
Yes, sir.
I so move that we support the fire luncheon and that EDC sponsorship of $1,000 for the
Second?
1920.
They moved, Bill, seconded by Alan. Alan, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Pass unanimously. And item 7 has a lot of good information if Rick and Glenn can get through all of these topics. So, we don't need a motion to have staff update,
No,
do we?
no, sir. So bear with me just a little bit, but we'll try to go through all these items. We'll bounce back and forth between myself and Rick. And if at any time there's a question, feel free to stop us and ask, and we'll get it answered. So some of the work that's been completed since our last meeting, I know myself and some city staff, I know Selena and Susan and Andrea was here, gotten together and trying to get some more promotional products for the city. So one we did is coffee mugs for Shop Helotes. And then we can use these as giveaways, but I'm also gonna put them in the local coffee shops. It's a way to try to promote the brand for Shop Helotes, and we have both Facebook and a website in the business directory. Something else that the city was wanting and I helped design were some lapel pens. There's 2 versions right now with, I know our projector's not the brightest over here, with the official city seal as one option and then a generic. And that uses one of our taglines, small town, big ideas, that we put on most of our literature. I was also asked to create a logo for a new program the city's rolling out, in partnership, what's the company's name? It's C-Click Fix. So there's an app that residents will be able to download, and in a cartograph, that's the parent, that citizens will be able to report issues, or they can also be directed to the right point of contact. So, if they're looking for a brush pickup, or they're looking for trash pickup, they don't have to call the city for that information. That's C6 disposal. If they're looking for electrical information, power outage, it's an app they can go to and go straight to be directed to CPS Energy. I believe it's still kind of a work in progress, but it's also for potholes. If you see a pothole, you can take a picture of it, report it, it gets sent straight to Public Works. They get a ticket generated, and the guys will go out and take care of the issue, and then that citizen gets an update that it was done. So I helped them create a logo for that one. Fiesta Metal. This
in?
is- They are in. You can tell we have a collector over here. So this is for those of you, excuse me, who may not be familiar, San Antonio has one kind of a 2 to 3 week giant party in April, Fiesta. And part of Fiesta is businesses and organizations creating Fiesta medals to promote their business. Some of them raise money for charitable causes. So the city this year did their first annual, hopefully, Fiesta medal. I helped with that design. They finally came in.
Oh, blow that up, I wanna see it. Can we blow that up? I know, make sure it's not look,
So
oh, we'll have
for,
to
for
use
the
that.
first one, and when you, okay, the picture doesn't do it enough justice, I'm sorry.
I see the Alamo.
We,
There's nothing Alamo. Never mind, I don't see it.
so,
City Hall.
so that,
City Hall,
that's
okay.
the windmill out front. It has the yellow vein, and it says Helotes, Texas on it. That is the City Hall, the council chambers. Obviously, we got our flags, and we had to have a piece of corn on there.
I was wondering what that was.
The blue,
Okay.
the blue bonnets are actually glitter on there. So it looks really nice in person.
It's very nice.
Very shiny.
So we did the live reveal January 25th, and they're now for sale here at City Hall. And we've got the UPS store, and I think we've got a couple other businesses that'll be selling them
What are they?
as
How
well.
much?
They're
$10?
$10.
That's normal.
One of the,
Do we get them for? $10.
gotta have Strook on that one. I can't.
I knew it. Unless we
there may-
trade.
There you go. I like to trade. This is our second year to do Shop Helotes. I went, it's Year of the Pig, so I just went with Miss Piggy.
You got Miss Piggy on there?
Yeah, Miss Piggy in air quotes, okay? And what we do with that one, we will set up at a few events, sell them for 10, but primarily, we go around to different shops, as you can see. We've got, our next one is tomorrow, we'll be at KFC. We'll set up, we create Facebook posts, we'll do a Facebook Live, tell people we're there. Last year, it went over very well. We would get, anywhere from 10 to almost 30 people show up to get a medal. And they've got to make a purchase at that business to get a medal. So I know. And they get the medal for free then.
I'll be there.
Kind of ironic that chicken is giving away ham.
And the way we picked the businesses this year was all the new businesses in Helotes. We may have one or two repeats.
Could you find any chicken places like that?
Well, KFC.
They're hard to find here.
KFC is one of the new chicken restaurants. Last year, we were at Golden Chick, and the owner actually said they saw a 33% uptick in revenue that day versus a typical, Thursday.
Last day they had it too.
So it's just something we're doing to try to help promote. We also, last year, helped bring in the Northside Education Foundation. They do a 5K run. I think it turned out much better than we expected, and the attendance was better than they expected. They had about 3,000 runners the first year. And they do that in conjunction with the Helotes Carnival Parade and then Carnival itself. So it's held on that same Saturday of the parade, run right before it. And it starts over here at O'Connor. They run down into the Old Town Traffic Circle and then come back. So they're back again. I think everything is set up for that event. And I know they've worked with Carnival too, where they sell discounted tickets. And Bert, do you recall how many tickets y'all sold last year just to the NEF?
About 3,500.
3,500 tickets.
It was wonderful. The only thing we had to do was, our ticket takers had to start up an hour earlier, and they had no problem.
There you go. Yeah, and all the vendors were happy and eager to open up early this year. They even offered to open up even earlier.
They're good people. Working out well.
And they do a lot of promotion. I know the city and Carnival both are partners, official partners, so they get a lot of extra marketing exposure for that. The Canvas Group, that's something, we had a conference call a couple weeks ago with Bear Burnett and Joe Fackel. Tried to express what this board's wishes would be in a contract. They said that they would put their heads together and get back with us. They did present an offer, and I know that's on the back of the VIA letter that was on the dais. So their offer to us, it was a $18,000 flat fee up front to do all of the research and provide the information to the EDC, and then they wanted $1,000 a month kind of retainer. So I know Rick had responded, said that's, not what this, he doesn't feel that this board would approve contract structure that way, that it needs to be more performance-based. They replied to us and said that they've tried to tackle that issue before, and they've never seen it successfully executed. And if that's what our interest was, then they were not willing to move forward, basically.
Okay.
Some of the commercial property,
Did y'all counter, did y'all counter instead of 18?
no.
When we were discussing this with them, I think we made it very clear that while there would be some money that we believe could be palatable up front from the EDC, we threw out a number between 5 and 10,000. More like 5 rather than 10.
Yeah.
And also that the $1,000 a month may be acceptable, but it still needs to be more performance-based rather than just get $1,000 a month for nothing.
Right.
And so that's when they sent the email back to my email and said, they basically don't want to do anything that's performance-based. That's the bottom line. And so I think at this point, we should just move forward and call that a moot issue and not
Okay.
worry about a retail consultant at this point.
Well, we didn't get anything for our money last time.
It's not an action item, so
Yeah.
we don't have to act on it. We've made no contract, and we just won't do one.
Okay.
Right, I don't like that.
Dang, guys.
I know, that's what I'm asking him.
we're
Are
all-
y'all allergic to something?
I'm contagious, by the way.
You're fine, okay.
Yes, sir.
No,
Yeah, well,
Just like to say one other thing about the NEF and everything, the NEF is also partnered with the San Antonio Commanders, this new football team. I don't know if you
yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Alliance of American Football.
Yeah, somebody has to pay for it.
Well, this is really hard to see on this screen. So I was gonna go through some updates on the commercial properties.
Here, here's
It-
some maps.
It's highlighted in green, which shows up so well right here, where the cursor is. Abizo Development, who built the strip center right across the street with the wash tub, the KFC, and we
Okay.
got Navy Federal and everything. They bought this other 1.7 acres. They closed in December. They've already set down, done a pre-development meeting, submitted their plans. They're building a 9,300 square foot retail office strip center. And part of it was that he had such a demand when he built his other center. It was fully leased before they broke ground, and he still had a list of prospects.
That's nice.
This one, man, I'll make sure this looks better next time. So there's a property right here. It's about I think it's 4.69 acres, right next to Jupy Mills and Helotes Catholic, or Christian Church. That one, they're looking at doing, the property owner actually wants to develop it himself, and possibly in the range of 12 to 15,000 square foot. So that's one that could be a business, more of a, I guess, a business park. So we could have electricians, plumbers, all that kind of stuff out there. He wants some of it retail, but he understands a lot of it will probably go more to the commercial side. And that was kind of don't look at the architecture. That's not what the purpose of this was. It was just kind of a simulator where we can just drop buildings down to give the property owner an idea of what could be built as far as square footage and parking, what would fit on his lot. So that right there is 15,000 square feet between the two buildings. Yes, as Rick just whispered, it's a terrible layout because it's perpendicular to the road. I agree. We created two different versions, and the property owner loves this one. And I tried to highlight how the property over at Falcon Bank, where Jalapenos is, struggled for years, and how the one here in Helotes has struggled for years. Yeah, Bandera Road, where Bandera Road Cafe is. Yeah, he still loves this configuration. So we do what we can to advise and try to show him the possibilities, different layouts. We'll see what ends up happening. He may end up, flipping it around. He could actually get a little bit more square footage if he does, because he can do two buildings behind each other. There's a property over here. Okay, so this is Bandera Road and then Scenic Loop that winds around. This property has, I think what you can see from Scenic Loop, a horse stable right now. It's about 20 acres. That property closed.
Is that right by Marnock?
Yes, it is.
Adjacent to the Marnock house.
So that property closed, and keep our fingers crossed. Everything is moving forward a little bit slower because with new owners of the property didn't realize it's a new venture for them getting in to a commercial construction. They've been leasing for the last 15 years. They live out Gray Forest area. They built their house, but now they're becoming their own commercial developer. Something they thought they could do in 3 to 6 months, now they're finding out it's probably going to be a year-long process. Part of the property is in a floodplain. We have helped them out with some engineering. But they are looking to build phase one, 12,000 square foot, 50 employees. All office,
I'm sorry?
all office.
And they're gonna lease it out, or what?
No, it's owner occupied. It's
own-
their,
It's
yeah.
their business?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, their business has been expanding.
What is it?
Judicial services.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
So they do document management, they do, I think, court reporting and some other stuff.
okay.
They're gonna do hill country architecture, and it's gonna be set back. I can see some faces.
You don't
It-
live in Helotes.
The property will be set back from the street, kind of where the house is now. They do not want to cut down trees and stuff, so they're trying to get everything in there because they love the views from the property.
And it is commercially zoned property, so it's not unexpected that that property would be a business at some point.
And their ingress egress would be from Scenic Loop?
They would have two, one off of Scenic and then one back here off of Monarch, as long as the grading works out, but they should be able to make it. This is not what the building looks like again, so please, what they showed us had a lot more hill country look, but we tried to throw something on the site to show parking, and that way they could get an idea of how much grading would have to happen on the site and everything.
So you said half floodplain, half what? Rock?
Yeah, it's a very steep property, so the front part, over half of the property is 7 acres.
Well,
I think
Jerry
is a
bought all
floodplain.
that property that goes down Old Scenic Loop, and that's nothing but floodplain on that section down there, and I think they plan to keep that for kind of a park area, recreation area
nature.
for their employees. It's gonna be one of the least invasive uses you could have on the property, being
Absolutely.
their own office space, and it won't be retail where you've got a lot of increased traffic going in and out. The way they're talking about design, it should be in addition to the city, it'll be attractive and
Okay.
Absolutely. Another one we're still trying to work with is the Bitter property at Bandera and Hausman. We have several developers interested, but one's expressed a lot of interest. I can say that Dr. Bitters himself had a heart valve replacement in January, so we haven't heard back from him lately. We're trying just to check on his well-being, but it's kind of stalled things out. Another one, let me get my bearings here. So it's, again, on the adjacent corner on Hausman. So Hausman Road goes through here, Bandera. Compass Bank is right there. So this little L-shaped property that's been on the market for a while,
is under contract. They have not closed. They do have a long due diligence period. But Birnbaum Property Company is the brokerage firm who has it under contract. They're looking to subdivide it. They have 2 tenants that'll be building here in Helotes, so that one does look good. So this goes back to a little bit on Bill and I think Patrick's comments on property database. We sat down and we had a meeting with both GIS Planning software company and then Real Massive out of Austin, who has an algorithm that aggregates commercial properties. Amarillo uses the product. There's a number of cities across the Texas and the country that use it. I just went with their site. So when you pull up properties, they'll have everything, there's little dots. Obviously, you can zoom in and see all the properties will be listed and have little microsites for more detailed information. Some of these icons across, you can click layers, and then you can select the heat maps. You can do based on population, age, income. So we have access to this?
We are looking to sign the contract. The delay right now is our contract with CoStar. We have 2 contracts. One of them set to expire in May, the other's not till October. The combined is $5,000, the outstanding balance. So we're trying to see if there's a way we can get out of that, because going with these 2 companies would be $10,000 a year.
So one of the things that I would look at is, can we hook this into what we would like to do going down the road with our website?
Yes,
And then make an API call for updated information
It
on the
does.
back end so that our site's continuously refreshed with
It is.
any properties that are,
it is. And
What's it
what's
called?
nice about this
Sorry.
is that, sorry, so it's 2 companies that work together. GIS Planning provides the framework, and they provide the demographic data, the infographics and all that kind of stuff. Real Massive just compiles the property data component.
Yep.
With Real Massive, brokers have access free of charge. We have access free of charge, well, so to speak, right? So if we need to update information, we find something is not correct, we can go in and edit. But we don't have to. We can also send it to them, and they have, techs that will contact the broker and get it listed. And that's the component I liked the best, is that they can do some of the more heavy lifting.
So the price you gave is for both of them combined?
Correct.
where peanut butter meets chocolate.
And so, yeah, we're hoping to move forward with that here pretty soon. I know both the companies are eager. We're just trying to see if we can get out of our current contract
I was
before
gonna say, this is
October.
something that's attractive for businesses that have not contacted us, and they're just doing research, and they come across something like this on our website, and they're like, okay.
Absolutely.
And then, there's another link that provides statistics supporting what they're looking for here from a commercial standpoint.
Yes, yes. And so that is one thing that GIS Planning was showing us. They do have the analytic component. So they know the person, they can't tell us, the person's name, but they know, I think, the company or whatever through the IP address, the locations, all that kind of stuff. They know what they're looking at, when they're looking at it and all that, and they provide all that information to us.
But the interested party that would be looking at the website, or at least something like this, and they're looking at commercial properties that are available in Helotes, we have statistics to support saying, here's how many residents are in Helotes, here's how much revenue came into
Right.
Helotes from all the businesses that exist, and here's the breakdown of the industry, here's entertainment, fast food.
Right. And this would provide us all that.
So that's information that they're gonna look for, small or large.
And then for mine, the last thing I was gonna mention was, State of the City, which I did provide a flyer to everyone. So if you are interested, let me know, and the EDC can pick up the tab for your entrance. I know we get a couple of tickets free with sponsorship
What's this on that?
This one?
on the State of the City, if you're interested in attending. I think Rick's got a few things he'll go over.
Usually pay for it. Uh-oh. It's like for formal. He's gonna stand up and give it to her.
Okay, I did want to go through a few things. Glenn has already discussed one of them, which is the commercial property database, the GIS integration, and the EDC website. We have essentially directed the EDC attorneys at this point to come up with some mechanism to cancel the contracts that we have with CoStar and LoopNet. There's a variety of ways that we're looking at doing that, but we don't want to have to pay the additional $5,000 through October. We want to cancel them now and stop paying now so that we can integrate Real Massive and GIS planning into our website. Director Seitz brought up about not having enough properties, or there's missing properties that are not on our website currently. And so that is why we are starting to look at Real Massive and GIS planning, so that not only can we make sure that the properties are online, but also more intensive demographic data for each one of those sites is on our website. I did want to bring up also, Director Seitz brought up last time about having a weekly staff report. Hopefully you'll see tonight that this is a little bit more in depth. And so we can't really compromise with y'all because y'all are the bosses, but what we would like to do is have a more comprehensive monthly report rather than sending out something weekly. And of course, you can let us know whether that's working for you going forward. One of the other things that we were looking at was the bird's eye view map. If you recall, they got with us or presented several months ago now.
Yes.
We provided to them a revised contract, had our attorneys review it, and to date, I believe we have not received any contract back from them. So I don't know if that means that they're not interested or if she's sick again, because she seems to be sick a lot. But
Part of the delay, I can unfortunately say she got sick, but that was the first part of January. I've talked with her several times, asked her what the delay was in signing the contract. She said she's still reviewing it with her attorney, that she's scared of some of the language that's in there. It's a more comprehensive contract than she's ever signed before. She wants to make sure that she doesn't get hung out to dry, and that was kind of her phrasing.
well, and on the other side, we want to make sure that the EDC isn't hung out to dry
Right.
either. So.
Yeah.
So that's where we are with bird's eye view maps. With the water and sewer line, we are still waiting on SAWS to formally approve that line. Just recently, TxDOT formally approved the line. And basically what they were waiting for was what they call soil stabilization or final stabilization. During the winter, they were having a hard time to get grass growing out there on the right-of-way. And so TxDOT wouldn't approve the project until it's quote-unquote stabilized, which is also one of our public works requirements as well. So I understand it, but that's been the delay. So now it's kicked over to SAWS, and we should be receiving formal approval from SAWS any day now. At that time, when we do receive that approval, we will request impact fee credits from them, and our pro rata refunds will start. For those members that were not on the board prior, basically we entered into an agreement with SAWS that said we'll go ahead and build the water and sewer line and we will pay for it ourselves. But when we do that, the cost of the project for the water line, they will give us dollar for dollar credit on the cost of the water line. So I think it costs between 1.5, 1.6, if I recall, $1 million for the water line itself. What they will do is they will issue to us impact fee credits, dollar for dollar of $1.6 million. Now, what does an impact fee credit do? It doesn't really do much for us, but what it does do for developers, every time they connect to a water or sewer line, they have to pay very large impact fees to SAWS. So what we can do with those impact fee credits is we can sell them on the open, I like to say black market, but there's not really a market for them, but people know when you have these impact fee credits, and they will approach you to buy them, probably not dollar for dollar, but that can always be negotiable. Or we can use them to incentivize commercial developments along Bandera Road. So if somebody wants to come in and build whatever, and both the EDC and city believe it's a desirable development, we can issue them impact fee credits, and essentially, they have to pay for the cost of installation of whatever internal to their property, but once they connect to the water and sewer line, it's free for them. We just lower the amount of impact fee credits. The pro rata refunds are a little bit different, and that is strictly for sewer. Anytime somebody connects to the sewer line, they pay impact fees as well. But a pro rata refund is they will give us a pro rata, SAWS will cut us a check for a certain dollar amount to reimburse us for the cost that we have in installing that sewer line. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's kind of a roundabout way to say it. So impact fee credits for water, we get upfront. Pro rata, we get paid out. I believe the agreement's between 20 and 25 years. It's been so long since I've looked at it, but it'll be over that period of time.
Do the impact credits have an expiration?
No, no, they won't have an expiration date. The other thing on the agenda was the Gateway Monument signage. We've already talked about this somewhat. I can tell you that we have contacted Jessica Castiglione, who is the new individual over right-of-way maintenance at TxDOT. And it's that right-of-way division that looks at Gateway Monument signage and its placement on TxDOT right-of-way. We have contacted them in May, June, November, and January, and I still have received no response whatsoever. And so after those 4 contacts, we don't like to normally go above people's heads because eventually it comes back to bite you in the rear sometimes. But at this point, we're gonna go to Mario Jorge, who's the district engineer, and start that discussion. I have a feeling that we will receive a response after we do that. 7F, what did I say? The Old Town Helotes Special District Pedestrian Bridge Project. So last time we reported to y'all, I think we said we were a month to a month and a half out from FEMA approval. So we're still within that time frame. I have not received, there has been some back and forth between San Antonio River Authority, FEMA, and our engineer who's doing the Clomar for us for the pedestrian bridge. But we're still within that window. So I'm still hoping that by the end of February, the beginning of March, we will have received approval from FEMA. I do want to clarify something though when we're talking about a Clomar. Again, we're basically wanting to put the bridge in what they consider the existing floodplain, which is at the exact same height as the vehicular bridge, right? So once we go through the Clomar process and we are able to construct the bridge in the floodplain, I do want to bring up that we will still have to do the final step of the process, and that is then complete a LOMAR. So they give us essentially conditional approval. They say, okay, you have approval to build it, but then after you build it, you have to remodel the floodplain with that thing in the floodplain. So after we do the Clomar and we build it, we're going to have to do a LOMAR, which is going to be an additional expense that we haven't looked at this point. I think we're okay dollars-wise because the EDC typically spends less than it brings in by at least $100,000 to $150,000 per year. So I think we're fine. I'm just going to tell you that eventually we're going to have to do that LOMAR. FEMA is going to require it. Now, we did receive updated cost estimates on the pedestrian bridge itself. I don't know if I went over this the last meeting, but the original bid for just the bridge was $146,000. The revised estimates from the winning contractor is $177,000. So over the last, what it seems like years, but at least 2 years probably, it's gone up about $30,000, primarily due to steel costs. We're shrinking it, but we're also we're shrinking the width of the bridge, but they also have to bulk the construction of the bridge up because it's now going to be within the floodplain, even though that bridge has never flooded since a flood gauge monitor station was, I think, installed there in the 60s. It's never flooded since the city's over the bridge. But anyway. The next thing is the MDD. So on the dais did you receive a copy of the receipts of those? Because I know Councilman's gonna want to see that. see that already?
I haven't seen it, but I know.
Oh, you heard from. So we received a response from VIA finally last week, where they said that it's not doable for them to release their jurisdiction so that we can then implement an MDD or call for an election within the ETJ to implement an MDD. That's, in my opinion, not the end of the story, however. There are a variety of options. Number one, I know that the councilman behind me, Councilman Buys, has discussed this matter with the city of Fair Oaks, and there are very similar circumstances with that city and its interactions with VIA and their creation of an MDD. So I honestly haven't looked into, I was waiting to receive the letter whether they're going to say yes or no, because sometimes they say yes. But anyway, in this case, they said no. So now we're going to need to look at what was the process that Fair Oaks took, and we'll also need to look at possibly legislative steps going forward. And lastly, we could potentially look at more legal recourse or options going forward. The issue, it gets a little tricky when we look at a legal battle or discussion, is that our city attorney is also VIA's outside counsel. So we would, in that case, if we're going to do that, we would have to hire an attorney outside of the city attorney's office, because frankly, VIA probably pays them more than us, and so he'll go with VIA, and then we'll have to find an outside attorney.
A lot more.
But first, we're gonna do the cheapest route, and that's to see what Fair Oaks did, and we're still gonna proceed. So I'm glad that y'all kept it in the strategic work plan at this point, because I think it's still something that needs to stay in there. The first no doesn't mean it's ultimately gonna be a no.
Would he recuse himself if that were to happen, if it went down that path? Because he represents both sides, and
He would have to choose a side to represent, or he could recuse himself entirely, and then, because VIA has internal counsel, they have in-house counsel. They just sub a lot of their work out to our city attorneys as well. So up to date, it hasn't been a problem, but in this case, there's some potential
it's just
issues
that he
there.
has knowledge of us and we have knowledge. I mean, he has knowledge that's specific to both sides, so.
Yeah.
I think that there's a conflict of interest if he were to represent VIA.
Certainly an ethical quandary for him, since he's an
Could be
attorney.
brought to his
I
attention.
guess he'll just
too.
drop us.
Yeah, and, well, they won't drop us entirely, but I mean, and I meant that facetiously in a funny manner about him going with VIA because they pay him more. That probably was inappropriate, but anyway, I thought it was funny.
Was Fair Oaks successful, or is that still pending?
Fair Oaks has an MDD.
They
I-
created one, or they had one?
They created an MDD, and they are within, it's my understanding, VIA's jurisdiction. I just don't know exactly what that process was and how they went about it. Like I said, I was waiting to hear back from VIA to see what they would say before I looked at any of their cities. So
Well, it
we will start
also-
that process now.
It also looks to me like there could be an issue of taxation without representation, since they don't serve any of the area they're taxing in this particular case.
Yeah, and I think that that's, from a legislative standpoint, that's probably worth pursuing if we have to go the legislative route, because that,
Well, hopefully
again,
we'll have
the
to
state
do-
legislature can make any law it wants to, as long as it passes, that says VIA, an entity like VIA can release its jurisdiction to a municipality or something. I mean, there's lots of different ways to skin that. The last thing was I was gonna mention about the Canvas group, and we've already discussed that, about them declining to essentially work with us because of the incentive-based system that we all would like. The Helotes Visitor Center planning, I was gonna defer to Glenn on that one, but I think he's already addressed that during the MDD, or excuse me, during the strategic work plan discussion. So with that, are there any other questions for staff? Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any,
Thank you, Rick.
we have, unless somebody has a question,
Or an
well,
issue.
we've already closed the agenda, basically. We can't, we'd have to reopen any item to go back and discuss it. So if you have suggestions for the next meeting or thing we need to do, get together, call Glenn or me, either one, anytime, and we can work on that and put the agenda agenda out prior to Friday, although it doesn't have to go out till Monday. We'll try to put it out earlier in the week and put more detail on it. With that being said, we will adjourn the meeting at 8:32.